Recently, Governor of Kano State, Dr. Abdullahi Ganduje, spent 208 million naira on empowering 5,200 Mashai, in other words, tea sellers in the state. According to the report, the governor distributed items like cartons of noodles, beverages, crates of eggs, nylon bags, cups, sugar, bread, and all that. And the government is saying that they're using that to empower them in order to increase their economic well-being. So we ask, what does economic empowerment mean to you? Also, I think it was yesterday or 2 days ago that in Ikosisheri here, the chairman had given out blending machine, grinding machine, exercise books, so many other things like that to people in the community. In his own mind, he has empowered the people. So we're asking ourselves, let's discuss. Is that empowerment to us, or what do you define as empowerment? And how do you think the people would rather be empowered? Mike, do you want to go first?
Well, you see, first of all, I believe that infrastructure is very important.
Right.
I believe that making sure things work,
right.
Hospitals, schools, those are the basic necessities of the human being.
Right.
Now, if you want, the additional one is that one when you give them bread and tea. I have nothing against it, because if you give someone 50,000 naira worth of tea and he can turn it into 200,000, good luck to the person who received it. Right. But the basic things have to be there in place.
I seriously think it's a failure of leadership when you do not have foresight of where you want your people to be. In the past, it's been a business. Meshai business in the north has been, all the way it's brought them down here. How do you want to help them, grow this thing beyond a small petty trade? Now, to say you empower your people by providing them tea and bread means to be doing Meshai continuously, for me, I think it's a failure of leadership, and it shows that leader does not have foresight. For instance, now, Kano is a population of how many million people?
9 million.
9 million people.
Yeah. And
till date, their workforce have not grown. Their mills and all that have not grown. How about skill acquisition? Teaching these people how to do printing of
noodles.
They are not noodles alone. The Ankara fabric that they were known for, the stress that they were known for, agriculture, something like that. Rather than just come and, explain away 208 million naira. Say, okay, I use this to empower this number of people to do this kind of businesses, giving them what's it called, wheelbarrow and all that, and
but
Nima,
I agree with you, but
almost an insulting manner.
Yeah, but you see, there's an argument that empowerment is in different ways. That there are other parts of the countries where you go, you see the donut seller on the side, he has his own small kiosk there, you have somebody selling pretzels, you have somebody, these are things you see outside. They are also being empowered. So what's so different in the state in Nigeria saying,
it would be understandable if I, as a minimum wage earner, look at a member of my family and say, okay, I can only afford to give you 10,000, and it can only get you a small kiosk, small space to provide business. But when the governor is thinking at the level I am thinking with an 18,000 minimum wage, then I don't think that person is qualified to be called a leader.
Well spoken, Nima. Why do we have a government in the first place? It's not to do what you and I can do. Right. I can build a hospital. I can build a school. I can build roads. So we come together as a people and pay 5% of our income. Put it together in government coffers for them to build infrastructure for us to empower ourselves. It's not for a governor to come and give me sausages to come and sell on the road just because some people do that as a business. Right. I researched Governor Ganduje himself. He has a BSc education. He has 2 master's degrees. He has a PhD in public administration. And if this is his own idea of empowerment, I'm disappointed in him. Someone who went to so many schools. Would he be a governor today if he did not attain that amount of educational height? Hold on. He was deputy governor of Kano State from 1999 to 2003. This person has been in government in our democratic dispensation. So is he saying, as at today, 2017, that the meaning of empowerment, even if it is what the people want, that's the meaning of empowerment?
But do you think it's an expression of the culture of the people? Because yes, not everybody can be in the formal sector. Not everybody can wear the blue-collar jobs. Not everybody can be in the manufacturing. The culture of the people can say, you know what, in our own community, it's selling tea. It is
Can I ask this question?
yes, go ahead, Wake.
The people that he has given these things, do you think that they are grateful or they
seem to be grateful. I mean, I saw some of the videos.
I'm sure that they will be grateful.
They are grateful.
They will be grateful.
The issues are...
But it's the foresight you're talking about.
that's why I totally agree with you.
2-3 years' time, how this Meshai business can turn Kano to a major economic achievement. A serious one. He's handing over to his successor, and the people are saying, okay, because you have done this number of things, Kano is better for it. Every single Meshai will just continue to do Meshai, and he will only empower himself to some extent.
Right.
He will not grow the entire...
The question I will ask him is, this Meshai, is he going to tax them?
Oh.
We don't
How? Sector now.
Because that's what I'm saying. This empowerment that he's doing, it's not what the...
It's not sustainable.
Okay, let's not put him on trial here. Down the
not?
streets here, because he's Sherry, they're giving exercise books.
Right.
Same thing you can buy by yourself. Blending machines. They'll be giving them
Let me remind you.
those things are...
Let me remind you of Governor Otum of Benue State, who gave wheelbarrows in May. I think that it's a miscarriage of governance. Why do I say that? Now, how many people are you empowering to be Meshai? Listen, Morayo, there's a need actually. I said
10,000 people.
10,000. That's 0.001 of the population of Kano State. What happens to the remaining people when you have spent 200 million that you could have used to build one hospital? Guess what? If that Meshai has malaria, he may die.
Solution.
So what I was going to mention was that there's a need actually for Meshai. I served in Niger State, and maybe out of laziness or because it costs you less to just go and buy bread and noodles of 100 naira than cooking yourself. There's a need for Meshais. But guess what? That's the kind of job that you do to send yourself to school. It's not the kind of job that you do to retire into.
Okay, let me take this cover. Thanks for calling. Go ahead.
Please, I just want to advise the lady near you there. That is, you should know that the culture of these people are different. A lot of people who are selling tea and chai here, they are making their money. They are studying their children to school. You cannot compare with people in the south who so depend on education. And education, when you go to school, it doesn't mean that you are going to work in government school alone. Some of the people are selling tea. Are you saying they didn't go to school? Please, when you are stating, you should realize the culture of people.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr.
I carefully use the word foresight, where you want your people to be
in future. Do
you want them to remain where they are, selling Meshai, and now solution? Governor Fashola at the time did what he called private sector partnership for waste management in Lagos. It was private individuals who owned the trucks, who saw the need, and they provided solution to our waste management at the time. Also in Lagos here, I had another example of the skill acquisition centers built around.
Yes.
It was so that everybody had the skill that they needed to turn into business whichever way they wanted. So that your people will not remain where they were at the time you governed them. But change their story. Now, if it is in their culture to provide tea, it's always been in their culture. The Chinese also drink tea.
Yes.
But today, where are they? Do you understand? The governor should be thinking of where the future he wants for his people.
Can I say something?
And not,
I know of many people, whether it's a security guard, a police officer, anybody. I know of many people who have used whatever business they are doing to send their children to school, to educate their children. So I'm not holding brief for Ganduje. I am not. What I'm saying is, this Meshai seller can use that Meshai that he's selling.
I don't think we're not disputing that. I think the issue I'm hearing is that there's nothing wrong in Meshai business.
Yes.
There's nothing wrong in you selling hot dog.
It's
nothing wrong in you continue to do it. It's your business.
God bless
you can even send children to school. That's fine. But the government's job is not to provide you the tea or the noodles to do that. It's to create the enabling environment.
Thank you.
So you can think of other, not just Meshai, you can think of even doing anything else.
Thank you.
I totally agree.
That's so.
That's why my first statement. That's why my first statement was, if he has not done roads, he has not done hospital, he has not done education.
So
Then
which,
he has not
which,
done
is what,
anything.
Not
which is
far.
the
If
point?
people are cattle, they are ranchers. I mean, it was cattle rearers. You could have this. The example of Ecomart in Lagos. Put in an enabling environment for them to have markets for their products
So the
without
point
paying no money.
So what we should be demanding of our leaders is not to give us noodles or blenders or exercise book. Teach us how to produce these things ourselves.
So now, Minister Fashola has said that each state can generate power. Governor Ganduje, go and generate power. Let your people create their own employment for themselves. Selling tea, I can sell tea. Right. If it is something that I'm doing in the short term to get to where I'm going to. I can sell things on the road, but not for a government to empower people like that. Let me quickly read a few tweets. Tokwe Salau says, people love street food. There's a market for shai in the north. What government ought to do is find a way to innovate the trade, bring it up to the 21st century standard.
Let there be power, so there's light to do Meshai anytime in the day. Let's take a break. We can't
expectations.
When we come back, we'll now talk about the budget that has been on since last week, I think.
Yes.
So our understanding, we're going to bring in someone to break it down for us again. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Stay tuned. Your View will be right back. Welcome back to Your View.
Thanks for staying with us. So last week, President Muhammad Buhari presented the 2018 budget to the National Assembly. In the budget, the president proposed a total expenditure of $8.6 trillion, which is about $23 billion, increasing from 16% from last year's budget. Now, what effect would this have on our economy? Joining us is an economist, Mr. Henry Boyo. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Moraga. Thank you.
All right. I know we've all been itching to talk about the budget, so let me let you go ahead. Go ahead with the first question.
Okay, so I'm not going to give all the figures because anyone who wants the figures can get them online. The budget is really not different from budget of 2016 and 2017, except that the figures are just a little higher. So I wanted to harp on just two sectors of this budget, one being health. Now, the recurrent budget for health is 269 billion and capital is 71 billion. Meanwhile, the Abuja declarations of 2001, Nigeria hosted other African Union countries where we all, committed to ensuring that 15% of each annual budget was dedicated to health. In 2013, there was Abuja Plus 12, also hosted by Nigeria, where we recommitted to, that budget. This year's health budget is 3.9% of the 3.9% of the budget. The highest that we have had was 5.9 under Jonathan or thereabout. Now, if our health budget is like this, when the WHO says that Nigeria is 187th out of 191 countries in health, where the world statistics say that we have the third worst infant mortality in the world and the second worst maternal mortality in the world. As much as I know that infrastructure, is important, which is giving number one. Hold on now, may I reach there? But if people are not alive in terms of health, who is going to use the infrastructure that you're building? So there's a problem. What's the solution?
Thank you. Quickly, make the question. We have limited time. Oga, please answer.
Thank you very much, Moke. The reality, of course, is that the kind of deficit you're talking about with regards to health is not peculiar to that sector. Okay. In the same manner, the UNESCO advised that 26% of every budget should also be allocated to education. I think this year just about 7 or 8%. And you can go on and on. But the reality is to check the actual requirement against what is being spent. Okay. For example, in the area of health, there is no doubt that you may require up to $30 to $40 billion in order to be able to get the health sector fully operational, the way we find in other successful economies. Now, you also mentioned that the 2018 budget is about $23 billion. And you are only spending about 30% of that as capital budget. In other words, you're spending just about $6 billion. And for health alone, you estimate you require about 40 billion. You can imagine if you depended on government spending in order to bring health about, you will wait for about 100 years and nothing would happen. So that should suggest to you that it is not the size of budgets really that is critical. Because if it was so, clearly every budget, every year the budget has been increasing. But what you find is an inverse, situation, absolutely. You find that in spite of the increasing amount being spent on these various sectors, health, education, transportation, that nothing seems to happen because, sorry.
I wanted to, I personally thought I had a bit of an excitement because I thought crude oil had hit over $60.
$60, yeah.
Over $60, and our benchmark was $45. Yeah. So I thought we were making some extra money. I thought that, okay, this is how much we budgeted, but there's a possibility that we'll have some extra money to work with. But nobody's talking about that. Is it realistic? Is it not realistic? Is there extra money or is there no extra money? I'm just thinking.
Well, Mariah, you have put your finger on something that has been going on in this country for such a long time and nobody really notices. Every year, even from the time of President Obasanjo, you would find that they would make a budget and predicate it on a low crude oil price. Consequently, they would project that we are going to have a deficit this year. And they would make a provision to borrow to cover the deficit. Meanwhile, the price of crude oil, and interestingly, they would still borrow to cover that deficit, and within the same year, they would consume that same extra that they earned. And it wouldn't be different this year. It hasn't been different in past years.
So what is happening to the money, the extra money?
That's what I say, that it will be consumed.
They would consume it. You hear, usually without legislation, the governors will put pressure on the president that it's our money, excess crude. There's nothing like that. It's not in the Constitution. And they would forget that they have already borrowed to cover the deficit. A responsible government shouldn't have borrowed when you find that you are earning some more. So to take your point, the fact that the price of crude oil is going up should reduce the need to borrow. But in reality, you find that decisions like that don't seem to be made by our governments in the past.
I was going to ask the question, and I was going to add the issue of the 2.014 trillion that is for debt servicing in this budget. And the Minister for Finance kept going back and forth on I need to borrow and I need not to borrow, and advising us, back and forth on what to borrow and what not to borrow. Now, quickly, the excess crude account is a foreign account that is growing. And you said, eventually we would have to go back to that account. What is the reality of this borrowing? How sustainable and advisable is it that must we do this borrowing thing and then service so much?
And just to help add to her question, this borrowing is what is worrying me. Because every year, every government comes, they borrow, they don't seem to pay back. Who is going to pay for this? Is it us, our grandchildren?
Generations yet unborn. Well, put it this way, the issue of borrowing should be taken very seriously. Even though government propaganda would direct your mind to say, we needn't worry about borrowing because the amount of borrowing to GDP is quite small kind of thing. But you don't need a very wise man to advise you that when you earn, for example, 1 million naira a year, and you already have to dedicate about 500,000 to service debts, and you have not paid your children's school fees, you have not eaten, you have not transported yourself to school or to work and all that, and somebody says, the best thing for you to do is to borrow some more. You see, the issue really is quite disturbing, particularly, I asked this question the other day on one interview. I said, if you have a situation where central bank is sitting on $35 billion, and central bank is a chattel of the Nigerian people because it's our servant, so it has $35 billion. And then your Minister for Finance says, look, we need to borrow $5 billion. But we cannot take it from central bank. Central bank is free to continue allocating and selling its dollars free of charge without any interest or whatever. But we have to go and borrow at 7%. And I have always asked the question, can somebody explain the wisdom in this arrangement? Why should you have $35 billion,
go outside the country,
which is being allocated freely and disbursed even to Bureau de Change? And then you now say your own government needs to go and borrow and pay 7%. Interest on it.
Let's take a stay with us. We'll be right back.
Stay tuned. Your View will be right back. Welcome back to Your View.
Thanks for staying with us. Yes, Jumaka.
My second long question, very similar to the first one, is focused on the education sector, where we're using 435 billion for recurrent paying salaries and wages, and 61 billion for capital expenditure. And President Buhari, just 2 days ago, while supporting Governor El Rufai, mentioned that we need about 4.2 trillion to revamp the educational sector. So very similar to the health issue, we have a problem in this budget also. What do we need to do? I'm looking for solutions. This government seems to do the same thing budget after budget, and 30% implementation of the budget.
I'll let you answer, but I know that you did say that it's not so much about the figures anymore. It's not about how, even if it is 5 naira you budgeted for, how are you using that 5 naira
application
to ensure that it's properly utilized and to benefit the children? So I think that's really where the issue is. But now that the president has submitted this budget earlier, does that mean we're going to have real deliberations? I mean, is there any benefits economically to us?
Make it more effective?
Or is it more effective now that we got it earlier?
What should concern us, apart from social welfare, is still this issue of debt. We had a capital budget of about 2.2 trillion naira in 2016 or thereabouts. And we're told by government that only 450 billion has so far been spent. So they would rush to make sure that at least 50%, in other words, possibly another 500 billion naira, would also be spent before December. If you could not spend 450 billion successfully between, is it June they passed the budget? And now you want to rush and spend 500 billion. And you still also have not said, look, we are borrowing to do all this. Why don't we take a step back and close the 2017 budget so that you don't have to borrow in 2018? We can now say, okay, let's move the balance that we didn't spend, because realistically, there's no way you're going to spend all that, you know,
in 1 month.
You know, why don't we just say, let's hold on there, and then let's look at the 2018 budget and reduce borrowing so that we don't continue to use 500 naira out of every 1,000 naira to service our debts. I mean, you know, that way, that shows responsibility. But if, on the other hand, you say, don't worry, let us borrow, and next year you have not made provision for how you are going to increase your income. You see, the most important source of income for government is taxes. And where do you get taxes from? Personal income and corporate organizations. In fact, in this year's projected budget, I think 2017 budget, I think the corporate tax contributed almost 1 trillion naira or thereabouts. So you can imagine that that is where the action is.
Yes.
But, you know, you cannot get people to pay personal income if they are out of jobs.
Yes.
You cannot get corporate organizations that would make plenty profit if they have to be borrowing at 25% or thereabouts. Okay? So you now find, or buy diesel as well. So you now find that, yes, government should increase its income, but the process by which government would legitimately increase its income is by energizing the private sector, such that the ordinary Nigerian would have greater consumer demand and have greater purchasing power, and also the people who are going to produce the supply that demand would also borrow at 10% or thereabouts.
Balogu, are you there?
I'm here, I'm here.
Please go ahead. Thanks for calling.
So I don't know what is happening in Nigeria. This man has linked to this man era, talking about the economy, how Nigeria the economy fight. I don't know why our government are not putting this man in a place where he can perform what is terrorizing every now and then. Let this man, if he can be a minister, let him put into the economic team. I don't know why Nigeria is making, I don't know why we are not making this our best place. I don't know.
Thank you very much, Wale.
Wale was saying that Mr. Henry Boyo has been saying this for the last 15 years. Why hasn't any responsible government made him a minister?
But that's if
sincere enough.
Enough.
Yeah, I wanted to harp on that because I said it during the Jonathan government. When you came here, I was like, why haven't they made this gentleman a minister? But is it that maybe when you get there,
you will change?
You will change, one, or I have to ask, or when you get there and the reality of the situation dawns on you, you say, there is no,
when our president got there, like,
yes, now because it happened with because you know they were criticizing the government, the Jonathan government. When they got there, their eye cleared.
I wanted to ask.
Concerning the budget.
Recently, we celebrated getting out of recession. You know, everybody was. How sustainable is this our escape from recession with this 8.0 trillion budget?
Thank you very much.
Good question.
But first, let me say I'm not aspiring to be a minister. First, I'm not a politician. And secondly, I don't think I have the lever to fight against corruption. So it's not it's not something that's an aspiration. But the reality, of course, according to your question, whether or not this budget will take us out of recession, you know, I have explained earlier that the budgets, unfortunately, Nigerians habitually believe that once the budget is implemented, things will be better. Every year we get taken for this same ride. Yes, you know, we're hopeful and then bang, at the end of the year, nothing happens. And the reality, of course, is that the amount that government spends is only a tiny fraction of what is required in an economy of, say, $400 billion. And you are talking of government spending of $23 billion. That is why I'm saying that what drives an economy and grows an economy is the private sector. And those factors that are required to drive the private sector, they try to deflect your minds from those so that you keep harping on the budget.
But what the government always tells us is that, listen, they agree that the private sector is going to drive the economy. But the private sector needs roads. They need power. They need all those things. So that's why the federal government says, I have to go and buy. I don't have this money. I need to borrow that money to provide these things.
You make a mistake.
Yes.
You make a mistake. In most successful economies, the government does not build everything and do everything. Okay. It certainly is more sensible if you can get private investors to come and do it. In the process, they will employ people, they will pay income tax, the companies also will pay corporate taxes. If your experience in the past has been that whenever government intervenes in this type of thing, what happens?
Corruption.
Corruption and the whole thing.
So
why would you want to continue in that direction?
Yeah, because you are right, because like, look at the Lekki expressway that but I was going to, because I heard on the news this morning, and I was very worried that they are going to come and go after private businesses now. They all have to pay tax. And I'm like, hey, you are paying tax on what? Is it the diesel that you are buying? Is it the everything? It's not working. And then they will come after, maybe not, my own is a small business, but they will come after these companies and force them to pay, but they're not getting
the benefits.
Yes, of what.
Is this vicious cycle that's the problem?
People have.
Let's take some tweets because we have to run very soon.
So, Omoleke Abiodun says our budget keeps increasing every year. 2016, 6 trillion, 2017, 7 trillion, and 8 trillion in 2018 with 0% implementation. I'm expecting 9 trillion in 2018. Josie K says, wait, why is Nigeria still taking loans? Shay, the man can explain that one. Otsunba, okay. Josie K again says, America's budget reflects the values and priorities of its nation and its people, but here is the opposite. Omo Bolahon says, with the seeming bogus fund allocated to the budget estimates, how do we ensure that funds appropriated are judiciously utilized? How do we ensure these funds aren't diverted into private pockets? How do we ensure implementation?
Peter Havens
I think we can end with that question.
says, from must every government in power borrow? This borrowing has affected our economy negatively. Our agricultural sector should be activated to help the oil and gas sector.
Okay.
Last question, Mariah. Sir, how should our budget look if we say this doesn't work?
First, First, let me say that we are floating in the expectation that 8.6 trillion naira is a very big budget. It's the biggest ever. But in reality, in 2011, the budget was 4.4 trillion naira.
And it was $31 million.
The exchange rate was 150 naira to $1.
Yeah.
So when you now you celebrate 8.6 trillion naira and your exchange rate is over 300 naira to $1, basically you are standing on one spot.
Very true.
So you haven't really moved. These are realities that we should consciously
Do you think we are standing on one foot?
We are standing on one and a half. One and a half. So a budget should be responsible. It should take first into cognizance what your needs are and what your income prospects are. Yes, you should borrow if necessary, but you should not borrow when you have a situation that is already so critical that you are paying 50% of your income for debt.
Debt servicing.
You should not also forget that the real sector that drives the economy is the private sector, and what they require are basically twofold. First, consumer demand should pick up. In other words, inflation should come to 1 or 2% so that money would be in everybody's pocket. And secondly, the industrialists should be able to borrow at 5%. Yeah. If you do that, we'll get 15% growth rate.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, sir. Unfortunately, that's all we can take on the show. I hope you learned as much as we did. Have a fabulous day. We'll see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.
Did you learn?